Well, awesome, guys. Good to be back together again for just another conversation, really trying to help church leaders who are wanting to make disciples. In Clarity House, we're all about building and how you build a disciple-making culture so that you're making disciples that are as unique as your city, right? And one of the things we consistently talk about, or that I hear you guys talk about, is this shift that churches need to make if they really want to be effective in developing leaders and in multiplying disciples is moving away from being solely a teaching center to more of a training center.
Mhm.
And not that we're doing away with teaching, but
Mhm.
teaching and training, that both of those are needed.
Mhm.
And so first, I'll just say we've got an article that goes into all of that. But Shane, maybe we'll start with you. What is the thinking behind why do we think that that's something that's needed, right? That
Yeah.
to add training to
Yeah.
that teaching center model.
Yeah. Maybe I'll start with what I shared a little bit in the article, and that is just really a confession that easy in my leadership to look at our congregation or look at those in our ministry, those are leading, and start making assumptions that the challenge of why they're not stepping into, living out the Great Commission themselves is because there's spiritual apathy. They're consumers. They're,
Mm.
whatever. And it was just coming to kind of my own kind of kairos moment to realize that that might be true and often is, somewhat true for sure because of the culture we live in and all that sort of thing. But that maybe the onus isn't all on the congregation. Maybe it wasn't a spiritual absence of spiritual zeal gap. Maybe actually it was a training gap. Maybe it's not that they didn't want to, it's just they really didn't know how to. We had stirred up, I had stirred up, the what and the why, and they were like, yeah, I get that, but didn't know the how. And so what I'm diagnosing sometimes unintentionally or misdiagnosing is, oh, there's a lack of real spiritual zeal among our people. But the truth is, they love Jesus. Right? But they just don't feel equipped to share their faith, or what does that look like? They want to be an influence and a gospel influence, but they aren't confident on how do they actually make disciples. Like, what's that? Like, how do I do that? What are my first steps? What do I do in the midst of that? They have a sense of calling of some sort, but they don't actually know how to step into that. And so it was going, teaching often stirs inspiration, right? It gives instruction. It helps us know the kind of the what and the why, but training starts moving into the competency side of things of like, well, how do I do this? And how did I then build the skills of competency to be able to do this in on repeat in the everyday places of life?
Awesome. Dave, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, a couple different kind of perspectives converging together. I mean, I went through seminary. I got trained on how to teach and preach, and I love that, and am a huge believer in it. I mean, even in the article, Shane's going to talk about the Genesis 1, kind of speak it into existence. I believe in that. Like, I believe that our words matter. I believe in the
Yeah.
power of teaching and preaching as part of that. But here's what I would say in regard to teaching and preaching. I'd say part of my evolution has been around understanding what it can do. So teaching and preaching can help me with my intentions, and it can help me try, but it can't move my intention to attention. Like it can't keep me focused on it
Hmm.
and give me real feedback on how I'm doing and where I get stuck in a way that training can. Trying, I can give it a go, but actually to get better at it, I need training, or in other words, you could put there as coaching in it. And I love the way that my friend Aaron Keyes talks about it. You don't get coaching just simply because you do something badly. You get coaching because you take something seriously.
Mhm.
And so, like, if we want to make matters of faith move from intention to attention and move from trying to actually being a competency to be able to do it, we've got to add a different kind of environment in which those things can happen. And so for me, I always go back to the fact that I did not get uh, trained how to do this in seminary. I knew this as a soccer coach. I know this when I go to my gym. I'm an Orange Theory guy, and I know that might have intentions for my health, but they actually focus my attention on it, and they help me stay attuned with it when I'm in there in a way that brings me to places that I wouldn't go on my own. And so for me, the kind of lingering question in my mind has always been, why does my gym take my personal thriving more seriously than
Mm.
our churches do sometimes? Like, why does your kid's soccer coach take their improvement in a skill like soccer more than we take that seriously in the things that we're trying to do through churches? And that has been something that is a 20, no, probably 30-year wrestle that I have had in my soul, and really, begun to say, why can't we take the things spiritually as seriously as our gyms take our physical health, or as, a soccer coach, I took the improvement of my players.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. Now, so when we talk about training, can you guys give just a few that was really good about why it's necessary to go from teaching to training. Um, Give me just some quick bullet points so I have reference of what are the key differences between teaching and training? Like how will I know if I've shifted into training as opposed to teaching?
Yeah, I'll give one, and then I'm sure Shane will give way more. And he's great at these lists of things that help us really make the paradigm shift. But here was the big thing in my mind, and continues to be, training marries content to competency.
Hmm.
So in content, I can tell you why you should do it. I can even tell you what you should do. But competency, I start thinking about, did you get there? Like, how good can you do it? How do I help you improve that kind of thing? And so, in a sermon, I can't do competency. But in training, it doesn't mean it's not content rich. I can bring in content on it, but I've got to go from content to competency. If I haven't put that in the water, then I haven't done training. If I haven't
Mm.
bridged content to competency.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot I think we could say here, right? Just
for
around,
sure.
some of that. But I mean, one of the places I go, let me go first to Paul, right? Paul says this, because since we all care about the word of God on this, right? He says, all scripture is God breathed. And what is it good for? It's good for teaching. It's good for correcting. It's good for rebuking. It's good for training. Like he like names out like levels. And
Yeah.
each of those I can teach to instruct, right? So that
Hmm.
again, it's kind of what we talking about a minute ago. Like it's providing information. It's even giving framework. Good teaching gives framework. How do I think about the gospel? How do I think about
Hmm.
how do I think about culture and think about teaching? How I need teaching for that. I need
Hmm.
on that. But now to put me in a place of practice, can I do something with that? That's
Yeah.
very different. That is, to Dave's point, is my competence, my ability to apply that in a way like I can do that out in the real world. So it's elevating the skill side of that, not just the knowledge side of that, but I can actually now do that out in real world, which takes practice, feedback,
Right.
trying, failing,
Yeah.
right? I mean, all the things that
Right.
we know we don't want. So
Yes.
that's a big piece. And again, I just mentioned that with Paul because Paul's again always going to remind us on that teaching is important. We're going to say that, but then it would even say, what does it look like for the scripture to be used for training? It's not just teaching again.
Right.
Yeah.
It actually means I have to be closer to you.
Hmm.
So I can't train a crowd.
Yeah.
I just can't. because I don't know if you've actually can reproduce the competency part of it, right?
Yeah.
I can know that you've received some of the information, but I actually don't even know if you have understanding of it,
Yeah.
Mhm.
really.
Yeah.
So it also
Right.
relate like there's the other thing is the distance has to close for training.
And
Got it.
part of that, Shane, that I think we talk about a lot is accountability.
Right.
Accountability. Like you're not going to get breakthrough in your life without accountability of some kind. And
Mm.
I even sometimes hesitate to use that word because most people think about accountability as spiritual policing. Did you do the thing? It's actually better to think about accountability as spiritual partnership. Not just did you do the thing, but how did it go? Where did it
Hmm.
go well? Where did it not go so well? And being able to give some of that corrective when necessary and some of that affirmation and way to go when things are going well. And so you can't do that in a teaching environment only, but when you get into training, you can begin to create spaces where really healthy spiritual partnership of accountability is taking place. And when that's happening, more and more people get to break through.
In that,
Yeah.
I mean, can I share a story about that?
Do it. Go for
I
it.
don't think I've done it here, but where I got challenged on that big time. I was it is actually I was in Israel on a study tour with a it was like a summit for disciple making movement leaders from all around the world, and we're tracing the life of Christ, and we're seeing how did Jesus create movement, all this stuff in the land. It was awesome, and there's a guy there named Ben Francis from Big Life in India, and it's just rapid, true DMM, rapid movement. And I just a humble guy, and I just say, I just go, Ben, I'm on a bus, and I lean in, I'm like, Ben, man, why do you see what you see in India, and we just don't see it here? And he looks at me and he goes, very humbly, he's like, Shane, see, in India, what I do is I train people, let's say, to share their story, and to share their testimony in just 3 to 5 minutes. And then I ask them, and I gather them in a tea house, he said, and I do this. And then I ask them, would you give the Lord 15 minutes this week? Just 15 minutes. And he says, and then they go. And we come back the next week. This gets to Dave's point on accountability. And he goes, the next week, I just ask, how did that go? And he goes, I go around the circle and different people. I shared with one person, I shared with two. It went terrible. He's like, I don't care. I don't care if it went horrible. I just want to know if that they tried, and we can coach back into that and things. And when I get to my brother who says, I just didn't have time, he goes, I look at him and say, brother, it seems like you have 15 minutes now. Why don't you go and do it now and come back and tell us? And then he looks at me and says, and this is what killed me. He says, but back to your question. He says, you in America, you give people information every single week. They go and do nothing with it. And then they return and you just give them more. And that thing about
It's like,
accountability to say, where is
right.
there some place in our cultural system, our system in the church and our disciple making culture that there is accountability. And again, I can't do that with 100 people on a Sunday and create
Right.
accountability, but there's those other spaces. So and Ben's, I mean, those words have been seared. And just he goes, he's like,
Right.
like, what do you think the problem is?
Hey, Shane, as you're talking about that, I mean, this might be just a caveat and a little bit of chasing something down a road, but I do think what you're talking about here is important, especially as we think about digitalizing training, because if the reason online courses don't work as much is because there's no accountability there. There's not that kind of
There's
thing.
no testing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if you
right.
are doing it
Right.
with 2 or 3 people and you were able to feed back and keep each other accountable, you're going to get way more traction off of that
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so, just even as we get to some practical ideas when we start digitalizing training, if there's no accountability to whatever process, no matter how good the
Yeah.
exercises are, doesn't matter how good you've actually, have stepped into the competency kind of piece, if there's not accountability, there's not going to be breakthrough.
Yeah. It's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so why don't we talk about, like, could you share a couple of examples? Even I love the example of the story, Shane, that you just told, but um any examples that you know
Yeah.
of like in a North American church
Yeah.
ministry
Right.
environment, what would it look like for, a, a ministry environment to shift from being more teaching only focused to
Yeah.
training?
Yeah.
So some specific examples.
Yeah. I'll start with one here. We can kind of ping pong. I'm sure lots of stories will come up. And just trying to, I think your point here is like, let's, as practical as we can. I think. So
Absolutely.
let's just say, hey, we're training someone in missional rhythms, and let's say we're using something like Dave Ferguson's Bless, right? Begin with prayer. You're listening to people, so you're praying God, who you're looking for those persons of peace. You're praying for people. Let's eat together. How can I serve them? Okay. So in listening, right? No, that's the skill of learning how to ask great questions. And one of the things that we do in certain places and have done with people is how do you ask questions in three questions? How do you get to someone's heart?
Mm,
Right. That's different than just saying, can you ask questions?
yes.
I can ask all kinds of questions to keep us up here.
Yeah.
And so one of the practicals around that would just be, hey, as you're listening to someone, you're asking about their week. That's their first initial
Mhm.
question, right? Just how's your week going and things. And they name something hard that's going on in their week, or a challenge or something that was
Yeah.
complicated. And it's just very easy for you and I to just click back and just be in dialogue there, and then just go, oh
Mhm.
yeah, me too, blah blah blah. But by the third question, can I get to Jim? What's been hardest about that for you,
Yeah.
and what else? And suddenly I've just moved from his circumstance, and we can just flip back and forth between, and your week's hard and my week's hard, and this is tough and that's tough up here, to suddenly Jim telling me about personally
Mhm.
what's hard about this. And if I ask one more question, well, what else? And then
Yeah.
from there, I have doors open then to saying, I'm now at his heart.
Hmm.
How do I speak truth to this? How do I pray for him? How do I, whatever?
Mhm.
I mean, one tiny skill within a larger training process that we do, but just one little thing and say, hey, we're going to practice
Yeah.
this week with 5 people. And when you come back, I want to hear your stories. Were you able to get to people's heart in 3 questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, I'll go more if that's micro, I'll go
Yeah.
more meta kind of piece and just say, one of the reasons that sometimes things get stuck in churches is because we haven't identified any of the competencies of the kind of disciples that we're trying to create. I mean, one of the things that we try and do at Clarity House is really ask the question, what kind of disciple of Jesus is your
Yeah.
church designed to create that your community desperately needs more of? And we define that both with character and with competency.
Hmm.
So because those competencies aren't even out there, you don't even know where to start with what to
Right.
there's general ideas of reading your Bible and praying and different things like that. But really, what's it mean? Like, what are those competencies that we need to train our disciples in to be able to do in order to be the kind of disciple that, we're trying to create? And so, even just starting there with the church and then having them identify those 4 roles that they turn into, and then saying, all right, for each of those roles, what are the baseline things
Yeah.
that we could actually get them a chance to practice? Because when you're creating a training experience, you've got that we always use the idea of say it, see it, try it, tie it. So there's a say it, which is the kind of teaching part of it, but they need to see a demo. People need to see a picture to imitate. And so
Hmm.
what I'm trying to talk about here is I know how to train someone if they're shadowing me, but how do I take, a 12-hour shadow process and turn it into a 45-minute training? Well,
Yeah.
here's the quick way. All those things that they're going to be caught if they were just to walk with me, I've got to now think about intentionally and say, what are those things? Can I identify them? How do I give them a demo at the highest possible level so they have a picture
Right.
to imitate in their mind? And then what exercises do I need to create to actually get them to practice so I can see them in real time and I
Yeah.
can give affirmation and critique on? And then how do I step back out of that to tie it to the bigger kind of piece?
Yeah.
That is saying this is one thing, it's not the only thing, but it is one thing. And here's the breakthrough, and here's where we're going to go next on that. And so one of the things that
That's
we're
good.
going to be even doing more of in the future at Clarity House is really helping churches identify those things and create breakthrough processes that are intentionalized toward the kind of disciple they're trying to create, so that they can do that in 45 minutes, a
Yeah.
series of 45 minutes in a process kind of thing, to
Right.
get better traction.
Yeah. That's good. All right. So I'm gonna put you guys on the spot here. So let's just do a real quick exercise of Dave, I love what you were saying about the roles, like what does a dream disciple look like, right,
Mhm.
in our church? And those different roles, and then what kind of, so let's just in the next five-ish minutes, think of a church that maybe you guys have worked with recently. What's one of their roles that just pop, like the roles of a dream disciple, that pops into your mind? And then let's say, what would a training experience look like to train people related to that role? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shane, you want to
You
name
go
one?
into grace because that's where we just were.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, great.
Yeah. So we talked about, Grace Erie, Derek Sanford, lead
Yeah,
pastor there, right? So we talked about him a lot along the way. We just had a chance to be
mhm.
back with them again, and they're very much in this place. They've landed their role. So one of their dream disciple roles is an intentional friend.
Got it.
An intentional friend. Yep. Yep. And then
Okay.
so you want to click off that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we were going to, um, I mean, like now
Yep.
I know enough about Derek to know,
Yep.
like he has and is going
Yep.
to continue to be teaching on these things on Sunday
Yep.
morning, right? Like
Yep.
it's not, so these will be the roles of the disciple, and hey, these are things that we think when we develop them in ourselves, it actually advances our mission, and he's doing that vision casting and inspiration around it. But what's kind of a training experience that you might invite people into, relate that he might invite people into, related to that, developing that intentional friend um,
Yep.
competency or character?
Yeah, so I think part of the deal there, Steve, is even with that, the role is so big. There's so many things that you could train, right? And
Right.
so
Yep.
the skill that we went in there and just kind of helped them with is just narrowing down as to what are our most essential competencies and skills. But like if I was just working with that,
Yeah. Just pick
something
one.
that might come up with, hey, if I'm going to be an intentional friend, I got to know how to handle conflict.
Mm,
Or we got to know how to say I'm sorry when I mess up. Like if
got it.
going to have long-term relationships that are intentional, how do I get intentional about saying sorry when I've messed up? Or how do I get
Mm,
intentional about, you know, doing conflict well? Because conflict
yep.
is going to arise. So
Right.
there's some things that you say, you know what? It's great to have the idea of intentional friend, but if we're going to really be investing in this, we've got to train people and how to say I'm sorry because most people don't know how to
Yeah.
do that.
No.
And I mean, we think we do, but we don't, kind of thing.
I'm
Or
sorry that you felt that
yeah,
way.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. Or we've got to train them in conflict, like how to deal with conflict in a way that doesn't just totally, disrupt the entire relationship. How do we work through things without
Yeah.
either, just canceling the entire relationship? So that would be some
Got
things
it.
that you would look at, and then you start saying, okay, are there some exercises that we can
Right.
do? Like what's been the
Yeah.
best experience we've had with that? What's been the worst experience with that? Are there some exercises that we know? And Shane, you want to step in and just kind of share?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, in that too, they named then, Dave said, like, there's so many things we could
Oh,
do.
perfect. Yeah.
And they named it going, all right, we're going to limit ourselves to this kind of training course in essence around this, or
Hmm.
training process is going to be limited to, no more than 6 times together. So with
Sure.
that, what's the primary objective? And they just named it. We're going to learn, and then just you can hear the competency here, like that.
Yeah.
That's is the outcome, not just what they know. And we're going to learn
Yep.
in this time. We're going to learn 5 essential rhythms to build healthy relationships, to partner with God and restore broken ones. And that suddenly just starts narrowing down like, okay, then there's a lot of other things we're taking out of this. We just
Right.
know very clearly that when people walk out of this, they need to have some growth in their competence in these 5 rhythms that
Right.
both build healthy and restore broken. And we're like, all right,
Yeah.
that's where we go. And then in that they started clicking into, hey, one of the first places that we probably got to look at is healthy relationships grow best when I see others the way that God sees them. So then the training around that is, how do you train someone to recognize the image of God in someone else rather than being
Huh.
to look at people with an eyes of compassion rather than
Yeah.
comparison
Yeah.
on that.
And then in that, I'm assuming then in that kind of training environment, it would be, hey, let's try this around our tables. And and you have some, even in that actual experience, you could
Oh,
you
for
could
sure.
you could have exercises and things that they're trying it out, um, and giving each other feedback of like, yeah, that was really meaningful when you noticed this about me, or that was really, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, every one of them, they're introducing a tool or experience specifically that is very portable. They're
Hmm.
having them try it in the room together
Yeah.
and then sending them out. And when they report back the next time, before they add the next piece, back to Francis going,
Yeah.
don't just give them more if they did nothing with it. You're asking those stories to provide for you. What was harder than you thought? What was better than you thought? What did you
Yeah.
learn in the midst of that? And now there's the accountability, there's the feedback, and then
Hmm.
let's add to that. Let's build on that as we continue to move.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll just say those are the kinds of things that I think, again, now I've got my church staffer hat on, right? And I'm thinking once those things are built out, and let's say, for example, you take your small group leaders through that training, then you can say to those small group leaders, hey, replace your next quote unquote Bible study from John Mark Comer, with which I love John Mark Comer, and that's why I'm using him as an example because
I
I
was
think
gonna be,
that's
I was concerned, Steve. I
no,
was
he's
concerned.
got fantastic stuff, but say we're gonna pause and we're gonna do 6 weeks on this, and
Yeah.
it is very different than most small group Bible studies that you would go to, right? Where it's like we're gonna read the thing together, we're gonna talk about what we learned from the passage and maybe how we might apply it to our life. But the next week we're on to the next topic, and we're not saying how did we use that this week? How did that go for you? That kind of thing, but saying, and you're turning your small group environment then into really that disciple making, developing skill kind of environment instead of just another venue for learning more and gathering more knowledge and more information.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things you just said in your language there, I think it's important, Steve, is because I think there's a difference between application and development in
Yeah,
people. Like, hey, we got your understanding, now go apply it. Well, yeah, I can apply it, but sometimes I actually need to be developed in something. Like,
yeah.
and so training is the intentionality of what the development process looks like for someone and taking
Hmm.
them on an intentional journey of development so that they can in the end better apply that to their life in a way that they succeed in more and more regularly.
Yeah.
And so again, I think we just sometimes pass over the development that's necessary for
Hmm.
application, and we definitely oftentimes don't standardize a process for that. And so, one of the things that I think has frustrated me in regard to training, and so learning this through either failures or different experiences of my life, is sometimes I've got someone who does a good job of laying out a framework, meaning
Hmm.
they're good at prioritizing what the biggest ideas are, but they don't
Hmm.
move that all the way to a process or into a
Hmm.
practice kind of piece. On the other end of things, sometimes you just feel like you're in practices, but you're not really sure what the prioritization is. And so you
Sure.
got,
What game are we playing?
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's kind of fun, it's interactive, it's different than going to a church service, but I'm not really sure why that was important and what it actually did for me. And
Yeah.
I think recently, and just kind of shameless plug for us here is we've tried to well, what we tell everyone to do, which is take your unconscious competence and bring it back to conscious competence. We've
Yeah.
tried to do that with the idea of breakthrough training, just
Hmm.
because, a lot of people were saying, hey, when I'm in a room with you guys, something different, I'm experiencing something different than what I normally experience. And we just kind of went back to say, what is actually happening?
Yeah.
And so I know we've got a webinar coming up, we've got
Yes.
some lab experiences coming up. And it's really us unveiling for the first time. We're not saying it's the only way to do this. We're just saying this is our best go at
Yeah.
unveiling what has kind of been some unconscious competence and bringing it back to conscious competence so that more people can do that kind of thing. Again, we're still learning as we go on this
Sure.
thing,
Absolutely.
but there's just enough churches in the water right now that are
Yeah.
saying, I want to train. I'm not
Mhm.
sure I know how to train.
Yeah.
That we want to
Yeah.
step into that moment and hopefully be some help to people.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I know we need to wrap up here, Steve, and I
Yeah.
just in that to what Dave's saying, and but even back to your question too, I think you're like you're starting to name like, hey, if I start having a training culture,
Yes.
it starts bleeding out into everything, right? Not just, hey, we run trainings, but
Right.
now there's a new mindset. And if more and more of our staff see themselves, as Dave's pointer even earlier about as developers, and more of our
Yep.
leaders see themselves as developers on that, what is a training culture? And just very practically, I would say beginning to shift to have a training mindset is
Hmm.
helpful. So if you get lost in the like, okay, how do we like we want to help you build training, we want to help you design training, we want to help you in all that stuff. But just even to have yourself like, I want to have a training mindset, something very simple can just simply be when I'm doing anything, right? I'm preparing a sermon, I'm visiting someone, I'm leading, I'm leading a meeting. There's very practical church stuff, right?
Yep.
To I'm, just engaging my neighbors missionally, in intention, with intentionality and things. Who can I bring along? Question
Yeah.
one, mindset. Who can I bring along? And then what Dave said earlier, like just the idea that development happens when people see it, when they do it, but then when they debrief it. And
Yeah.
so three simple questions after like they're bringing them along and they're not just there to watch or, and see it, but to be able to say, hey, I actually want them to maybe even try a little bit here, but also I want us more importantly to be able to debrief this. And so just three questions. Like, what did you see? What did you see
Yep.
me do? What did you see happen?
Right.
What would you do differently? So it puts you in
Yes.
that humble mutual process of like, I do, what would
Absolutely.
you do differently? And then what did you learn? What did you learn? And I like to add a fourth one to that
Good.
is, and who else could you take that to? Like who else
Yeah.
needs to have this good news as well, like in essence, or who else needs
Yeah.
this, that you could share this with, which will only reinforce it for them. But if you just have that mindset of going like, anything I'm doing, even,
Yes.
I'm just starting to go, who can I bring along with me? And then just to start asking some very practical questions afterwards. We're starting to debrief this. I can turn lots of things into a development, a training opportunity. So we've got organized things that we're doing, but even in the everyday things too, that we're going, hey,
Hmm.
how do I turn this thing into? But it starts with going, I can't do that if I don't ask, who could I bring along? Who could I
Right.
bring along with me?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Hey, Steve, can I just say one more thing here, just
Yeah,
kind
for
of
sure.
wrapping us up? I mean, I
We
think
don't like to talk about this.
I know, yeah.
Right.
I think I mean, this is just my own stuff, but part of the reason that we want to train but often don't train is because training takes more time
Yeah.
than you realize. Like if I'm going to teach something, I can teach something 5, 10, 15 minutes. If I'm going to train something, every single thing that I could teach in 1 minute takes more minutes to actually give the experience on.
Yes.
And so, part of the time that I think we get so focused on trying to get so much done
Yeah.
that we don't actually take the time to slow down and say, all right, what would it look like for someone to see a demo? What would it look like for them to
Hmm.
actually try? Like it takes longer,
Yes.
but the breakthrough is greater and their
Yeah.
ability on the back end is greater. And so, we're just kind of encouraging everyone with this series and the things that we're doing. Teaching is great. We love it. But you need some environments for people to be able to slow down in and actually develop in.
Yeah.
And our hope would be, years from now, that this becomes just a regular part of the environments that we create at church. There's developmental environments, feedback environments, those kinds of things. We're calling that a training center,
Yeah.
and that would just be kind of normalized in most churches.
Yeah. That's really good. Awesome. Well, thanks, you guys. Really appreciate your thoughts and insights. And yeah, we're going to continue this series next time because, like you say, Shane, I know you guys have plenty to say on this topic. So we'll come back again. So
In the
thanks.
meantime, go to the webinar.
That's exactly right. Webinar and the Dream Disciple Accelerator,
Right.
Yeah, that's
which we've
really,
got
yeah.
coming
If
up.
you know the
So
kind of disciples you're trying to make, it's a whole lot easier than to figure out how to train them.
how to train them. That's exactly right. So
Thanks,
awesome. Thanks,
Steve.
guys.
Appreciate it.